Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. Tonight our guest is John Moses, who is a current member of the Chelmsford School Committee. He's also founder of the Mass Afghan Alliance, and he is a self-admitted lifelong Democrat who I guess was born and raised in the city of Lowell. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. And tonight's discussion, we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. By John's own request, we're going to focus primarily on the political situation in the country, the state, and even locally. John is also a member in good standing of Chelmsford's Democratic Town Committee. So with that little bit of an introduction, John, is there anything you want to say very briefly from a biographical nature to help orient the audience a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly, I've been in the town for a long time, pretty well versed in the local politics of Chelmsford School Committee. But if a lot of people don't know that I also work a lot with the National Democratic Party and the National Democratic Party when they were in administration. So a lot of our resettlement and work with Afghans actually gave us a real good window into the Democratic at the national level, as opposed to and local as well. So I think it'll be a good discussion. I think I'm really interested in talking about what we've lost because of the election and kind of the response of the party and kind of where we sit as a party. And it's just my opinion, and I hope people are interested.
Well, I hope so too, and it's always good to, whenever you go through any kind of a situation, it's always good to sit back and analyze and see what went right, what went wrong, and I guess we don't learn anything unless we do that, right?
Absolutely.
So that's good. So with that as an introduction, I'm going to ask our producer, Vilu, to play a little bit of a clip, and this is from the December 3rd, 2024 interview I did with State Representative Simon Cataldo. And our viewers will remember that Representative Cataldo is himself a Democrat, and I would categorize him as a fairly progressive. He's not totally off the charts, but I would say he's a fairly progressive Democrat. So if we can cue that up, Vilu, and if you can play that clip, and then we'll let's take shift a little bit to there. national politics. You know, in case anybody missed it, we just had a national election, which I think for many people in Massachusetts anyway, I think the results came as a bit of a surprise. So I'd like to get, as a Democrat, right now in the minority party nationally, okay, I would like to get your reaction to what's just happened and maybe some insight as to why things happened the way they did. So I'll let you expound upon that.
Everybody's got their take on this.
Oh, they certainly do.
Sam, and I think when people are reading and looking at those takes, they should be cautious about believing everything you hear, because I think everybody has not only their own biases, but probably they're looking to confirm things that they were thinking or saying even before the election happened. Here's, I think, what I'd say any Democrat should be doing is starting with introspection and reflection. It is undeniable that for a year, national Democrats and the Biden team, President Biden's team, gaslit the American public. Said from the podium of the White House press office that any concerns about President Biden's health were right-wing deep fakes.
I would even argue it's longer than a year.
And that was not true. And still, when that became clear for everybody watching a debate, they were told to disbelieve the evidence of their eyes and ears. At that point, you just lose credibility. And you especially lose credibility when you did that throughout the entire primary process, such that there was no primary, such that other candidates were kept off the state ballot, if not with the direction, at least with the acquiescence of the national party. And so the people were not given a choice during that entire process, and it was worse than lying to them, Sam, because they were basically told that they were conspiracy theorists if they had any concerns. So there was a credibility issue, and I think that credibility issue got significantly worse yesterday.
Okay, John, so that was Representative Cataldo's take on it, and again, I've known Representative Cataldo for a long time now, and I find him, if nothing else, to be a very, very honest person who is capable of self-analysis and introspection. So,
Absolutely.
with that said, I'm going to allow you to expound upon what you just heard and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. First of all, Representative Cataldo is a great representative. I'm in South Chelmsford. I'm part of his district, and he's right. He's dead on. So one of the things that I found, so there was a moment in history where Donald Trump was running, and there was a point where I think President Biden found his role in history, and he said, "I'm going to show up. I'm going to win this election." And he had the broad support of Democrats everywhere. We're like, "This is your moment in time. You're going to go out, and you're going to go out, and you're going to save the republic," right?
So we're talking
2020.
2020.
2020, right? And he found his place in history, right? And gets elected, does all this work, and then come 2024, when we're running a new election, rather than trusting the people and understanding his place in history, because I remember very clearly President Biden going on TV during the debates, and people would say, "What is your plan? You know, we're trying to get younger in the White House, we're trying to do this." And he said he was going to be a bridge to the next generation. Mm-hmm. So he made a promise to the American people and to the people that voted for him that he was going to lead us into the next group of leaders in this country, right? And what we saw in 2024 was the ego of the president, where he became the Democratic institution itself. So he became the Democrats and made a choice on our behalf that he was the only person that could beat Donald Trump in the next election, or whoever the Republican nominee would have been. I think that was devastating. I think for me as a Democrat, it was really difficult for me to take that. And then throughout the process, as he mentioned, there was this incredible gaslighting. I remember, and this wasn't just national Dems, this is at state level everywhere. I remember after that debate, we all saw that debate, and I remember the next day from the Mass Dems, we got an email that said, "Did you see President Biden take Trump to task?" And it was like reading something from a different planet, right? And how do you have credibility when you're sending things like that? Right now, and it hasn't really been, as far as I can see, that attitude within the Democratic Party of the ability to look inward and understand the people you weren't talking to has really been detrimental. I think he's dead on. People know what they see, and the Democrats continue to do it.
So Simon, in your opinion, you and Simon are in a definite small minority of Democrats at this point.
Yeah, it's shocking to me. So here's the results. So being a part of a party is an investment in your life, right? So there's some people that invest in Republican ideals. I chose to invest my life in Democratic ideals, and it came from my grandfather. My grandfather was the son of an immigrant, and at 13 years old, his parents passed away. Raised his entire family, dropped out of school, only spoke French for a long time, never learned how to read. But my grandfather knew one letter in the English language, and do you know what it was?
D.
It was the letter D, because he said, "I will always..."
I guessed correctly. I can't believe it.
My grandfather, who didn't know how to read and raised a wonderful family, including all of my mom and everybody, and did this really hard work, said, "I vote Democrat because they stand up to bullies." And he told me that your life, if you rely on Democrats and you pull that lever, that Democrats are going to come and take care of you. And now what we're seeing is a party that very clearly doesn't want to take on the task ahead of them, because they're talking about things like grocery prices, and they're talking about putting really, really non-dynamic leaders in leadership positions within Congress and in front of everybody. And really, quite frankly, I just think that the Democratic Party has lost its roots. There's no LBJ in this party. There's no Truman in this party. There's no FDR in this party. And at the state level, I find the support in the mirroring of that national party to be dangerous for Massachusetts. We're a sovereign state, and we have our own needs. And winning this election has done damage to this state. So just to put it all in perspective, 23 years, I retired from the Army. I've still been a Democrat. I went overseas. I did all the work, ran for school committee. And at the end of all of that investment in the Democratic Party, what I received was a 3-6 Supreme Court. What I've received is an Army, my daughter, I wouldn't feel safe joining, nor my son, because by the way, they're doing away with sexual assault rules now, right, about reporting requirements. Men get sexually assaulted in the military, right? It's not an inclusive Army, and it doesn't. I have friends losing positions. So my investment in the Democratic Party has landed me in a place here in Chelmsford in 2025 with not a lot of future as a Chelmsford, as a town, to have access to that state system through the DTC and through the state committeeman rules. But just generally speaking, the loss of this election and the ego that it took to do this, the hubris to fail so hard over so many generations and not be able to look at yourself and say, we're not doing the right things. Why is the party apparatus telling everybody who to vote for? There should have been a primary. There absolutely should have been a primary, and the Democratic people, the Democrats, should have chose that candidate.
So why do you think that didn't happen?
Because of the ego of Joe Biden, President Biden.
Well, I think, okay, so not that we started out we're having a discussion, folks. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with John because he has his opinions and I'll have mine too, but I think we need to flesh this out a little bit. I'm a little bit older than you are, and so I've watched Joe Biden for over 50 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and what I saw, I'll just give you my thoughts on this. I saw clearly in 2020 that we were not looking at the Joe Biden of 2016.
Agreed.
I saw a decline in the man within that 4 years. So when he took office in 2020, he had already started on that descent. That's one thing I will say.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll say relative to what you said a minute ago was that, and it's actually consistent with what you said, a lot of people voted for Biden for two reasons. Number one, he wasn't Trump. Okay, so that was a big reason they voted for him.
Yep.
And the second reason they voted for him is because they looked at Joe Biden as the old school Democrat, the Harry Truman Democrat, the JFK Democrat, the guy that was, he's a little bit on the progressive side, but he's more centrist, okay? Because whether we like it or not, a lot of my liberal friends disagree with me, but as a country, we are a center slight right country. That's where we are philosophically as a country. Not in Massachusetts, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's where we are. So most Democrats historically of the Biden mode, to get elected, they walk that centrist road. But I think in Biden's case, having watched him for 50 years, my opinion is that he really was a centrist Democrat.
I agree.
And what I saw over the last 4 years was he got overtaken by other elements in the Democratic Party. He moved from being centrist traditional to very, very left-wing. Okay, so that's my perspective. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to let you continue the discussion.
No, I think I think you're spot on when you talk about the decline piece. So interestingly enough, after I got the email that asked me, if he took him to task, a state senator in a parade walked up to me and goes, "So what'd you think of the?" People were concerned, and I'm like, "Why is the Mass Dem party and the Mass Dem politicians having this different vibe, right? Like, what is the disconnect?" But certainly, I think Biden has been a centrist. I think he should have remained a centrist. I think really he was so big on the institution. The institution of the United States is important. The institution of the presidency is important. The Democratic Party institution, Republican Party institution, all institutions that are really important. But when you become the institution and you take on the onus of, I'm the only one, you better show up and play ball. And the other thing is these Democrats down the ticket, really I felt, again, the gaslighting, right? Coming out asking me for money and then constantly texting and asking for money after you've put somebody out there that's really struggling. So, but I do think I do agree he was a centrist. I think he did a lot of good things. Working with the refugees, I will say, working with the National Dem Party was really difficult too. So the Democrats in Congress and the work down there. One of the things I really found is they're very elite. They're very hard to get to, and they treasure their own ideas. So the Democratic Party has got great ideas, but I really feel like they think theirs is the only ideas, right? They don't take a lot of outside feedback. It takes work. If I want to go see an elected representative, I'm an elected representative. I've had to pay to get access to different parties and events just to get 3 to 4 minutes with an elected representative. I've had to pay money as a Democrat to get into the parties. To get into the Vice President Harris's party when she was a candidate, I had to ask somebody. So I'm a veteran, I do all these things, and I'm like, hey, I really would like to go. I want to speak about Afghan issues, I want to speak about these things. And I had to buy a ticket as a veteran, and I had to go find somebody. And if you don't know anybody in the Democratic Party, how are you going to get a ticket? So for me as a Democrat, stop asking me for my money and stop making me pay for access to you guys. because we've really become like a donor class. They make plenty of times for donors. They show up for donor events. They show up for those when the people need help. Because right now, Donald Trump is doing damage. He's doing damage to the work of regular people. And I keep getting emails about groceries. And it's just not okay.
Give me some insight. You say you get emails about groceries, so what are they saying?
No, it's just, so throughout the course of this election, right, they told us that this is the most important election of your lifetime. This is it. Democracy.
I've heard that before. But
Democracy, no, this was the whole thing. Democracy is on the line. And then as soon as President Trump won, they haven't become a party of opposition. They haven't embraced federalism. Red states kick Democrats around for a long time as a minority party. What I see are people being, whoever's sending out communications for the Democratic Party is like, look at Donald Trump not lowering the price of groceries. It's because he's not trying. He doesn't care about that. There's a man hollowing out the institution of the executive branch, and we're having conversations that like we're running against Bob Dole. This isn't Bob Dole. Why are you not running an obstructionist government? Why are you voting on any of his nominees? Everything should be held to halt. $3 trillion in federal payments got stopped today.
Well, what do you make of the fact that Marco Rubio received unanimous consent from the Senate? That surprised me.
You know,
I mean, just to your point, you just mentioned, you know.
Here's the thing. I don't know. I don't know. I think because he's probably been in the system for a long time and he's probably got the friends in the relationship.
You think that's
and he's probably the least crazy of the candidates.
You think that's part of the problem?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'll give you my take. And I'm not registered in either political party, but I will tell you, I started voting when I was 21 because back in the dark ages, that was the age. You didn't vote at 18, you had to be 21, okay? And so when I first registered, I registered as a Democrat, and I was a registered Democrat for about 7 or 8 years, okay? And I got out of the Army, and I settled back in here in Massachusetts. And I had a friend who decided to run for the state legislature, and he was a very good friend. The problem is he was a Republican.
Yeah.
And he wanted me to help him, and I said, well, I can't do that. I'm a registered Democrat. And so we talked, and I said, well, what the heck, I'll switch parties. So for about the next 15 years, I was a registered Republican.
There you go.
And then I got so fed up with the Republicans and fed up with the Democrats, I became an unenrolled. And I have been for about the last 35 years, all right? So philosophically, I'm not aligned with either political party. I'm in agreement with a little of each, okay? There are areas in Republican philosophy that I agree with, and there are areas of Democratic philosophy I agree with, but I will caveat that by saying my frame of reference is 1960 and 1970.
You got it.
It's not 2020, because things are completely different from an ideological standpoint.
Absolutely.
Okay, than they were in my frame of reference. So I'm still mired in the dark ages there. But I try to be as objective as possible when I look at candidates and vote for them. My observation is that Republicans and Democrats, typically at the national level, it's all part of a club.
Yes.
And you're either in
Marco
the club
Rubio.
or you're not in the club. And Rubio is a perfect example of that.
Club.
You have Democratic senators who voted for the guy unanimously because he's a member of the club.
It's the club.
And one of Trump's problems, and I know you're not a Trump fan, obviously, but initially the biggest problem with Donald Trump is he wasn't a member of the club, and they're never going to let him in, okay? And that's part of that is my take on what a large part of our national political problem is, okay? We need more people who have got the country in mind first. Right. Okay, I will stop talking, continue. This is your show. And I want to hear a little bit from you about how you think that you should go about, and people who feel it as you do, on the local level to push it up. So go ahead, John.
So the word I actually wrote down is courage. Okay. So when you take an oath to the United States Constitution, you have an obligation to always defer to that. That's your answer, right?
I hope so.
And there are people within our elected government that do not have that quality. They don't understand the weight of an oath. They don't understand what it means.
They've never read the Constitution.
They've never read the Constitution, right? And maybe even if they had, not understanding an oath is a really serious thing.
Exactly.
So they fall. I think after the election, there's been a new reality. And what I really feel like, just across the board, is that the Dems, and we'll kind of go in a local bit here, have not faced the new reality. We're on day 9, right? And my programs in my nonprofit have been significantly already impacted, right? Resettlement has stopped. There are people,
Is that by function of executive order?
by function of
Okay.
executive order. So, and again, the $3 trillion. But what are we going to do locally? So I think some of the things that we need to do locally, and I've thought a lot about this. Chelmsford needs some new leadership in the DTC, in our Democratic town committees. I think Democratic town committees some of them are great. If you actually go on the Mass Dems website, it says the boots on the ground, right? But then you go into some of these towns and it's like it's 3 people and the chairman, and they've been there for 50 years.
So I'll stop you for 1 second for the people who may not know. So in Massachusetts, under state law, you are supposed to have a Republican town committee and a Democratic town committee. Those are the 2 primary recognized parties. And if I remember correctly, the authorized strength is 35 members. So you can have up to 35 people, and these people are elected by the townspeople at large.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that I found is that there's a real disconnect between these are supposed to be boots on ground. They're supposed to be out doing events. They're supposed to be, coordinating with other organizations. They're supposed to be pushing the good work of Democrats in the community, finding volunteers, increasing your vote count, advocating for Chelmsford, which has been gerrymandered for 25 years. There's a lot of things you can do, not just within the DTC, but for a lot of people that don't know this, there's actually an organization behind the Mass Dems, the State Committee, which in our town has been jammed up by the same 2 members for nearly 40 years, and it hasn't been contested, and I think it's probably time to be contested. State committee may build all the rules around the Mass Dem party, and these rules that you see.
So we've had the same Democratic state committee men or people for 40 years, is that what you're saying?
35, it's a long time, it's 30 plus.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been the same person. Now, multiple generations of Chelmsfordites, I don't know what we call ourselves.
Close enough.
Close enough. You meet people that are really interested in being part of the Democratic Party. And then a lot of them come to me because I'm vocal, and I'm like, hey, why aren't we doing outreach? Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And so you have generations of people like Mike Rigney. Mike Rigney wanted to be the board chair.
I remember that years ago, yes.
And we tried, and then we keep trying, and we keep trying. And what essentially keeps happening in a lot of these Democratic town committees is people use the rules to lock themselves into a seat for a long time, 35 or whatever, how many years it was. I mean, so at the end of it, how are you getting any new voices? How are you being attractive to people that want to actually do work, right? And at some point, technology is going to come into play. We actually have a DTC that has very little technology capabilities at all. So how are you going to take people, somebody that's been in charge for that long, has not done a lot for the town of Chelmsford in terms of getting us our reps back or being on any of the subcommittees? We don't have anybody on the state committee or the Mass Dem subcommittees either. So when we look at those things, like, is Chelmsford being served by its Democratic town committee? And whether you're a Republican or not, it's a Democratic state, so it's helpful to have.
It certainly is.
Yes. And so for me, I'm asking people, there's actually a meeting, a Democratic town meeting, if you're a Democrat, Thursday night, 6 p.m. at the police station training room, 6 p.m., and I hope you'll show up. There's going to be a call for new leadership. We're going to call for new direction, and we're going to go find some new chairs and vice chairs and people that really want to go out and do work and talk to people like they need to be talked to, because a lot of us are on the outside from that Democratic Party that you have to pay to get into, and it's not a great place to be. So I feel like local residents have an opportunity right now to speak up.
Now, in this past election, and I looked at the numbers, and I was a little bit confused compared to the numbers of the previous 4 years. It looked to me like a lot of Democrats didn't vote. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's absolutely a
Okay.
fair statement.
Yeah.
Again, the Democratic president put out a promise that he was going to be the bridge to the next generation, and then just,
Didn't do it.
didn't do it. He didn't do the bridge, and then not only did he not do it, he didn't hit it out of the park. And those failures at the national level seem far away, but when you talk about what they're doing with executive orders, this is an immigration community. Are you expecting that ICE won't show up in Chelmsford and Lowell and these other
Oh, I'm
places?
sure they will.
And they will. These things are going to directly impact people. IINE, International Institute of New England, who resettles people, they cut off all funding, including for people in apartments. So there are people raising money now just to cover the cost of apartments so we don't end up with thousands of homeless people. So national Democrats, state Democrats, get out of Boston, get west of 495, sit down and go into Lowell, go into Worcester, talk to those communities. We lost Hispanics. We lost a ton of Hispanics.
See, I think
Yeah.
I think that, and that's been underplayed by the press. I think that's a major problem.
Major
I
problem.
think a lot of your Democratic leadership, and again, this is me looking inside and saying, look, again, this isn't the party of Truman. This is not the
No.
party of Kennedy. A lot of the Democratic leadership are very well-heeled, well-off
Yes.
people, and I would even call some of them elitists. And they have no concept of what it takes for the average person to get through a day. They
Right.
have no idea,
Yes.
okay? And well, I heard it on the news this morning, and I would say this to any politician, especially on the national level: get out of your little bubble and go out to the middle part of the country and talk to some real people.
Yeah.
Okay, and see and get that perspective, okay, because the world does not revolve within a 35-mile radius of Boston,
Right.
or New York City, or
Right.
Washington, or Los Angeles. Okay, you've got to talk to people. It's incredible to me that the Democrats lost a lot of Hispanics, a lot of the black vote,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. So, if that's not a red flag, John, nothing is. And I'm kind of surprised that more Democrats aren't talking the way you're talking and talking the way Representative Cataldo was talking, because the first thing you have to do is look in the mirror and say, gee, did we do something wrong? And if we did,
Yeah.
what is it? And let's fix it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so, yeah. Boy, you're all fired up.
I am. And
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we got. So we got 3 minutes.
Go ahead.
So I just want to close out on this.
Yeah.
Something that has really gotten to me lately. We had to do a sensing session with the Massachusetts Democrats. Mass Dems held like the session.
Sensing.
Like sensing. You could go in and give 2 minutes of like why you're upset about
Okay,
this.
all right,
So
good.
like a sensing session.
Good, I
right?
got it, yep.
And, we go through this whole sensing session, and one of the things I realize is I'm going through like Chapter 70 is one of my complaints, right? Like you give all the money to the urban schools. Like, our school could have really used $1 million this year, but it got cut out of the budget, and you know why? Because we don't have a rep in the state Congress to support us. One of the plank items for the Mass Dems party is equal democratic, everybody has equal access to the democratic process. For 25 years.
Not non-gerrymandered districts.
For 25 years, before I even came here, Chelmsford was gerrymandered. It has not had direct representation since. Meanwhile, Republicans are absolutely ruthless. We have a Republican seat next town over. Gerrymander them. Be a hard party. We need to fight back with the Republicans the way we fought back. Make Massachusetts blue. But more than anything, we're the historic seat of the district. Lowell didn't exist, Westford didn't exist. And the fact that this Democratic Party actually took time, effort, and votes to suppress Democratic votes. We went plus 23, by the way. Bill Rick, I think, went plus 3 Trump or something like that. Why are we getting punished? Why are we getting punished? Because Carol Clevin got elected in 1980s. And it needs to be fixed. And you know why they won't do it is because we would probably crush anybody else. And Joe Reddy showed that during his election. So Chelmsford shows up for its candidates, and we would win against Westford, Carla, any of those places. That should be the goal for Chelmsford for the next time they look at the map.
Okay, so so we looking at you for a leadership position formally in the town committee or in any other political arena?
So I plan on working really hard. I'm actually going to, when we work on this new state committeeman process of trying to get some new leaders in, I'm going to run for a state committeeman role. I think that'll be important, and my role would be to support Chelmsford inside of that chamber, right? And with those people and those people with influence. And I'm noisy, and I understand there's probably people that are going to watch this that aren't going to like my attitude about it. Well, these are the people that you should talk to. I grew up on the corner of 6th Reed Street in Lowell. My grandfather was a janitor his whole life, and he only knew one letter, and it was the letter D, to vote for Democrats. So I've earned my right to be here.
Yes, you have. And John, we thank you very much. I'd like to continue this conversation. Maybe we will later. You got 30 seconds to tell the voters you're running for school committee and you'd like their vote.
And John Moses. I am running for the Chelmsford School Committee for my 4th term. I just want you to know that I would really appreciate your vote, and I hope you'll come out and vote for me. More importantly, I want you to understand that I understand some of the changes that are coming in the federal government and things like that. And you're going to need really responsible, measured leaders like myself and Maria Santos in the school committee for the next 3 years.
Good plug for John, good plug for Maria. We're out of time, John. Thank you very much. Great show.
Thank you very much.